This video is not for persons under the age of 13. By watching this video, you are declaring that you are above 13 years of age. Hello and welcome to today's video. I'm going to be painting this image. It's a composite of two separate photos. The background is a silhouetted sunset. I assume it's a sunset, and I've just added a couple kissing there just to add a bit of extra interest to the composition on the left hand side. So it's a fairly simple image. I hope you can get something out of it, and let's have a look at what we're going to be doing. The brushes, here they are. This is the large one that I used to really start with, and progressively we get smaller and then down to the fine detail towards the end of the painting. And try to just use a minimal amount of tools and get used to using them. It's a really good tip, that, and then you get proficient with painting because you know how the brushes work. These are my paints today. This is my White Nights large set. I've got 2 or 3 different White Night sets. Really nice paints. Can't really say anything bad about them really. They're quite cheap to buy and they're very good quality. These are obviously full pans, and you can get them in tubes as well. The paper I'm using is Misuse Expressions paper, which is 300 grams, £140, and it's cold press 100% cotton paper. So let's get to the painting. Using the large mop brush, any big mop brush will do, I'm thoroughly wetting the entire paper, all of it, even including the area that will be dark later, because I want some of the residual paint to flow into the dark area as much as I do in the sky. So we're just making sure it's all nice and evenly done, and then we're going to move on to applying some paint. We'll make a start with this underpainting layer with a very light, almost peachy kind of a colour all over the sky, and just let it flow, let it do what it wants to do. The key to this kind of painting is let the water do what it wants to do. Don't battle against it because you'll make a mess of it. Moving on to a slightly stronger colour now, but all of these colours are all going to pretty much blend towards one another because the paper is very, very wet. But we want that. This is an underpainting, and we'll get various forms of oranges, reds. There's some peach in there. Later on we'll be putting some other colours in there as well. So a very strong representation of red there, and as you can see it's spreading throughout the paper itself because the paper is very wet, and it's best to do this while it's all wet, as much as you can do while it's wet, and the wetter the paper the more you get done. And we're softening edges. We're going to bring a little bit of the colour down to the bottom of the hills, and we're going to also introduce a little bit to the people themselves, because we want it's not always going to be absolutely black and silhouetted when we're completed. And it's a matter of adding little bits of flicks and various little bits of water to it and let it do its thing. We can now move on to blocking in a bit of the blue sky. Now at the top it's going to be darker than it is on the horizon line, but we'll just get a middle blue in there and let that also blend to some extent into the rest of the painting. And it may look a bit sloppy at the moment, but eventually we'll tighten all these areas up once we've got a couple of layers on and make it look like a sky. I've put in some very light blue there because on the horizon it will be fairly light. In fact, I'll lift quite a bit of that off later on. So we've got that mostly blocked in. We're trying to get it to blend a little bit more. Obviously it's starting to get to the point where it's drying, so we've got little time left to get some more paint down on there and let it all blend, and we can keep adding and adding with this. We'll go on and add an extra amount of blue to the upper areas and certain parts, because later that will really be considerably darker. So this helps with creating that sense of deepness and darkness. We keep doing this, and there I've just put some water, pure water on that, and I'm lifting off some of that bottom area, and you can use the brush to do that, but I also use a technique to use paper towel to dab that, and we'll see that in a bit when I'm ready to do that. And it's really about mixing a nice blend that you like at this stage. This is only the initial wash layer over the painting, and again I'm re-emphasising that dark area with some ultramarine blue, and I believe I put a little bit of purple in that particular cloud there just to give even more deepness. We've allowed time for this to dry and settle now, so it's time for layer 2, and this is a lot more heavier application. It's wet on dry, in the sense that the paint is wet and the paper is now dry, so you get a different kind of feel from that, but we will be putting more water on it to help it to blend to some degree. To counter the strong red there, I'll be putting several other colours in, including this strong orange, and that will give it a nice feel all over, and adding a few teeny bits with the people as well. Again, I'm going towards that peach with that colour there. It seems to be working quite nicely. That when you see edges of clouds, they sometimes have a glowy bit that I don't know, it's just like a glow, and this is a very opaque colour, this peach, and it seems to cut through everything. So I've added a bit of that, and it might not look like anything at this moment in time, but we're going to get it to all flow together again. And I'm going back to this blue again. Again, that's an opaque colour, but it will work once we've started doing some blending. So little bits of blue again, and we constantly keep building these strong colours on top of one another. And that obviously I've put a lot of water into it. I'm going to get a lot more water now and get them all to start blending into one another. And this is where the real action happens. It's the water that does the work for you. It just becomes this wonderful array of colours, bringing some of that colour down again into the hills, because I want it to have a slight amount of colour. It's not going to be a black silhouette. I'm putting the deepest, darkest blue I can put in that corner, and letting that do its thing. And the odd bit of blue that's diluted there. And now's where we start using the paper towel, and that helps with the blending, but it also helps with texture. And don't just use it in one standard way. Try finding different ways to creatively apply the paper towel. And as I said earlier, the bottom half of the where the horizon is going to be very light, so I'm starting to take a bit of that out. But as you can see, there's a nice blend starting to go in there that looks quite sunsetty now. Don't worry if you get little bits of paper towel on your painting. You can get them off later when it's dry. They'll rub off. But it's a very nice way of producing quite a few nice effects. And now I know that's a little bit drier, I'm going to go in with my smaller mop brush and start doing a little bit more closely focused detail with this. But always remember to try and keep this very abstract, and don't try painting details with clouds, because every cloud's different. You're not gonna say, oh, that's a specific cloud. So again, we're just doing bits of blends, looking for areas where we can soften it, areas where we can make it a lot harder, and pulling a bit of that colour into the people again, because that will be important later on in the painting. Continuing to keep building these colours up in an abstract way. I've just put a little bit of very light blue at the bottom on the horizon, again back to a slightly deeper blue near the redder areas, and you keep building these things up, and it's a real adventure doing this. You've got to be careful not to overdo it though, and it's dead easy to do that, so you really do need to be aware of what you're doing with this. It might look quite simple, but getting the right balance isn't always that easy, and try your best to use various different types of brush strokes as well. I'm getting a little bit more of that creamy colour in that peachy cream colour, and that helps because it's a bit of an afterglow of colour. But as you can see, it's building up nicely into a nice, strong, vibrant set of colours, and we can keep working at this, and you might do several layers of this, and but it'll be worth it in the end. And again, I'm using that technique to soften and feather out various bits of paint that I've applied, creating a lost and found edge on some of them, and weakening the paint in certain areas, so that leaves a lovely strong vibrant bit in other areas. So always have some tissue handy. Again, we've allowed that to dry, and we're going to start focusing our attention on the horizon, the hills in the background, and that will also include the more foreground man and woman. Now they're all going to be the same kind of value, but we're going to put a really deep dark blue, which I've created with ultramarine blue and a burnt umber brown, and we're going to let that go in to start with, and as we get more into near to us, I'm going to weaken the solution, and as you can see it's slightly more bluer as we get closer. Adding another layer of darker colour. Now you can put a bit more brown in it to make it even more darker. The very top of the horizon, I'm making that much more darker, and that will bring out that lighter area eventually when we come to that. Obviously at some point we will be doing the man and woman, and there I am, I'm putting a little bit of red in that just to give it that slight feel of some residual colour coming in from the sky. And it's not that obvious on the video, but it does show through on the painting. But it didn't really ought to be, because I want that dark, very dark, because that's a long way away in the distance and you're not really going to see that. So I'm very carefully, and I think I really ought to have used a smaller brush here, but I got away with it, and we're doing the man now and the woman, and just blocking them in basically. Now I've done the left side first of the man, and I've done that fairly dark, but I will put a little bit of water in and do that a lot more lighter on the right side of the man, and it kind of shows like a bit of light hitting him on that side, so it gives it almost with a silhouette it can look two-dimensional if you're not careful. So by giving it that little bit of light at that side, which is where the light is coming from, you can give it a sense of not just the fact that it's three-dimensional, but the fact that it's closer to you, because some things that are closer to you, even though they're silhouetted, will have more tonal detail. And same thing with this woman as well. To the right hand side she'll be slightly lighter than she is on the left, and obviously this is just the first coat. Now I've done the right thing here and started doing the rest of the detailing of the painting with this Japanese calligraphy brush, and they're very good, these, for doing detailing. So we'll just let that dry a little bit, and we'll move on once that's ready to have another application of colour on it. So making sure I'm refining the shape of the face, it's reasonably important thing to make sure there's not much detail in this painting, so I want to get the areas that could suggest detail as right as I possibly can. And it's a continuation now of getting that to have that same density, dark at one side, light at the other. One of the other things I'm doing here is going back to that tissue paper, getting a bit of texture in there. I think that's a little bit overkill, so I'm going to do something with that to make sure that it's slightly more darker than that, and making sure that the value that is in the ground near the people is of a similar nature to the value that I'm using in the people. And again, I'm emphasizing again some abstract brush strokes to make it seem as though there's different facets to the face and to the body, and that will help with the sense of three-dimensionality. Now, what we again have to be careful of is that this image is very basic, so we don't want to be overly detailing things, because that can unbalance the image as it is. Most of the things on here are very basic blocks of colour. Some of them are blended, but we want to keep that basic blockiness. Now the background's had a little bit of time to settle, I'm going to work on that a little bit more. And again, it's just trying to keep that balance and not overdoing it. I'm just doing under the chin there. I felt that I needed to get a bit more definition, and we'll keep refining this till we're happy that we've got everything done that we want to do. And once that's done, we can do the final finishing touches in the background. What this painting shows is that with just a few strong colours you can get a really powerful painting, and you don't have to look at silhouettes as though they're black. It's very rare that you ever see anything that's absolutely black, so we always have to keep that in mind. It don't mean to say that you can't use black, it's just that more often than not it gives you a better balance when you create dark areas from combinations of dark colours, cool and warm. And that's what I've done here with this dark area. I've used warm areas and then I've used cool areas, and I'm just continuing to create textures there. I'm not too fussy about it, but you know, trying to keep that abstract thought process, we keep going on. And now I'm gonna get the final elements that are needed for this painting. I'm using that calligraphy brush because it's great for doing stuff like this, and I'm not painting in absolute fine detail. I'm just squiggling the brush around and letting the brush do the work rather than me planning every little leaf on the tree. They're fairly distant things, so don't really put too much emphasis on them. But one thing you should really do is make sure that when I painted the horizon line on this, it became a very strong line. So wherever there's trees that connect to the ground, make sure that the line's not cutting through it, and soften those edges, which is what I do. So we're literally just getting these last little bits of trees and stuff in. We're not far away from finishing touches, and you put as many trees in as you want. You could even put a tree in the foreground if you wanted, but just be careful where and how you apply that. So last strong finishing touches. I've made sure that there's some light hitting the back of the man's back, and it gives it that level of believability. Here we have the final painting. A very basic silhouette placed onto the back of a vibrant sunset to counteract it. So I hope you've enjoyed that, and thank you for being here, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.